I forgot to tell my daughter that the technician had fixed the apartment's security camera yesterday. I decided to test if it was working and turned on my phone. I was in shock when I saw what my son-in-law was doing to my granddaughter, but only 10 minutes later, I'm glad you're here. If you are watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of now cold coffee and an uneasiness in my chest that wouldn't leave me alone. The house's security camera system had been acting up lately. The signal would come and go, and that didn't sit right with me. I always want to make sure everything in the house is secure. So, I called the technician. He was a young guy with a friendly smile who arrived even before the scheduled time. He spent a while checking the recorder, adjusted the Wi-Fi router, and then turned to me, smiling. "All set, Mrs. Eleanor. The signal is stable now. You just need to open the app on your cell phone, and you can see everything at any time." I nodded, thanked him, and walked him to the door, feeling a little more relieved. In the late afternoon, I went to pick up Lily, my little granddaughter, from school. She is 8 years old, with big round eyes and a smile as radiant as the sun that always warms my heart. Lily took my hand, and as we walked, she told me about her day at school in her little voice, clear as a bell. But that day, I noticed she was talking less than usual. She only answered me with short phrases and then walked in silence, occasionally looking down at her little white sneakers that were already looking a bit yellowed. I told myself that maybe she was just tired or had a bad day at school. Just as we got to the house, Julian, Jessica's boyfriend, was also coming in. He had moved in with us just a few months ago, even though he and my daughter weren't married yet. Julian always presented himself with an impeccable appearance, a kind smile, and small gifts. Today, he brought a box of buttery shortbread cookies that smelled delicious, the exact kind Lily adores. He knelt and said in a voice as sweet as honey, "For my little princess." Lily smiled slightly and took the box, but I noticed she didn't open it immediately like she always did. Instead, she hugged it to her chest, thanked him quietly, and went to sit in a corner of the table in silence. Dinner went on as usual. Jessica was busy in the kitchen and shouted for Lily and me to set the table. Julian told a couple of jokes, trying to lighten the mood, but I realized Lily was just eating with her head down, never looking up. I asked her, "Sweetheart, did anything fun happen at school today?" She just shook her head, and her fork paused over her plate of rice. Jessica frowned and said in a slightly sharp tone, "She's starting with her drama again, Mom. Don't spoil her so much." I stayed quiet, with a pang of sadness, but I didn't want to make things more tense. After dinner, I felt tired, probably due to my age, so I excused myself to go to my room and rest. In the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly with a dry throat. The room was completely dark. Only the light from the street lamp filtered through the gap in the curtain, drawing faint patterns on the ceiling. I reached out to grab the glass of water on the nightstand, but I accidentally touched my old cell phone. Out of one of those habits that come with age, I opened the camera app, just to check that everything was in order in the house. The screen lit up, showing the usual living room, the sofa with its worn-out fabric, the wooden coffee table, and the vase of dried flowers I had placed in the corner. No one was there. I was about to turn it off when, suddenly, a shadow entered the frame. It was Julian. He was pulling Lily by the hand. I felt my heart stop. Lily, my little granddaughter, was standing there, motionless, her little hands clutching the hem of her pajamas, her little feet as if nailed to the floor. Julian sat on the sofa, patted the space next to him, and in a deep voice that carried an invisible pressure, he said, "Come on, sit here with me." I clearly saw the hesitation in every one of Lily's movements. She stood for a moment and then, slowly, walked over and sat on the very edge of the couch, as far away from him as she could. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, not daring to look up. Julian gave a smile, but that smile sent a shiver down my spine. He pulled out a comic book and gave it to Lily. When she took it, he deliberately leaned forward, putting his arm behind the little girl's back. That gesture, though small, made my blood run cold. It didn't seem like the affection of an uncle, but something unnecessary, calculated. Lily shifted a little to move away, but Julian suddenly pulled her towards him. He leaned close to her ear and whispered something. I couldn't hear what it was, but Lily's face instantly turned pale as paper, and her eyes widened, full of terror. I felt like someone was squeezing my heart. I started to run out of air, as if it had suddenly become thick. I wanted to scream, to run out of the room, but my body was frozen. On the screen, Lily tried to get up, as if wanting to escape. But Julian grabbed her arm tightly, with a pull that made her fall into his lap. It was a rough, violent gesture that made Lily flinch and her little shoulders begin to tremble. He said something else to her, but his voice was too low for the camera to pick up. He suddenly looked towards the camera, which made me jump and feel my heart hammering in my chest. But then he looked away, as if he didn't know the camera was working. I suddenly remembered. I hadn't told anyone that the cameras had been fixed. No one in the house, not Jessica nor Julian, knew it was recording everything. I quickly turned off the phone, clutching my chest, my breath caught in my throat. A mix of fear, anger, and helplessness washed over me, like a storm tearing through my mind. Only one thought echoed in my head. I have just seen something that no grandmother in this world would dare to imagine. I lay down, but even though I closed my eyes tightly, I couldn't sleep. The image of Lily with her pale face and trembling hands clutching her pajamas wouldn't stop tormenting me. I wondered, what is happening in this house? Was Julian, the man I thought was decent, the one Jessica loved, really the person I thought he was? And Lily, my little granddaughter, what was she enduring? I clutched the blanket, my heart in pieces. As a grandmother, I had promised myself I would protect her with my life, but now I felt powerless, as if I were facing a monster without knowing how to fight it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, but it couldn't dispel the chill that gripped my heart. I stood in the familiar kitchen, trying to make a delicious breakfast to chase away the anguish that was eating me up inside. I prepared some oatmeal with brown sugar, with that toasty scent, and hot chocolate, which Lily always loved. I hoped the warm smells would make her smile again, even just a little. I called Lily to come for breakfast. She came in with sunken eyes, as if the whole world weighed on her small shoulders. She sat down, picked up the spoon, and stirred the oatmeal a couple of times, but then she dropped it and said quietly, "I don't want any more, Grandma." Her voice was as small as a choked whisper. I looked into her eyes and saw a sadness so deep I had never seen in an 8-year-old girl. My heart sank, but I tried to keep my voice soft. "Eat a little more, sweetheart. I made this oatmeal especially for you." Jessica, my daughter, came out of her room, her hair still messy and her purse in her hand. Seeing that Lily wasn't touching her bowl, she frowned and said harshly, "Every day with this fussiness, you're just trying to make me mad." I wanted to say something to calm things down, but before I could speak, Julian appeared. He stood in the kitchen doorway, with that same smile he always wore, the one that now gave me chills. He came closer and said in his honey-smooth voice, "Come on, sweetheart, don't scold her. Let me convince her." He gently placed his hand on Lily's shoulder. It was just a touch, but I clearly saw my granddaughter's little shoulders flinch, as if she'd been zapped by an electric shock. Her whole body tensed up, and her hands gripped the edge of the table, as if she wanted to run away. I looked over at Jessica, hoping she would notice how strange that was. But my daughter just gave Lily a sideways glance and continued putting things in her purse, getting ready to leave for work. She paid no attention to the child's reaction, as if everything were normal. I wanted to scream, to say that something was very wrong, but there was a lump in my throat, and not a single word would come out. Lily, in silence, ate a few more spoonfuls of oatmeal, but her movements were slow, as if she were only doing it out of obligation. Then she got up, grabbed her backpack tightly, and ran out the door, without another word. I watched her go, that little back, and I felt my heart break into pieces. I knew something was happening, but I still didn't have the courage to face the terrible truth I had seen the night before. On the way to school, Lily walked with her head down, her eyes fixed on her now dingy white sneakers. I tried to make conversation, asking her about her homework, her teacher, anything to pull her out of her silence. "What did you learn today?" "Tell your grandma," I asked in a soft voice. But Lily just shook her head again and again, her lips pressed tightly together. I stopped, put my hand on her shoulder, and said quietly, "Sweetheart, if something is making you sad, you can tell me, okay? Your grandma will always be here for you." She looked up with a hint of doubt in her eyes, but then shook her head again and said in a tiny voice, "It's nothing, Grandma." But the way she avoided my gaze left my heart in a knot. After school, I was waiting for her at the gate. Lily came out and gave me a weak smile when she saw me, but that smile wasn't enough to hide the exhaustion on her little face. On the way back, she started talking. She told me about a drawing she made in art class and about her friend Chloe, who had shared a new colored pencil with her. I listened, trying to enjoy that rare moment when she opened up a little. But as soon as we opened the front door and she saw Julian's silhouette sitting on the living room sofa, Lily's steps came to a dead stop. She froze, clutching the straps of her backpack, her gaze lost somewhere else. Julian looked up and smiled with that fake charm of his. "Is the princess home already? Come here, look, your uncle brought you a treat today." He held out a chocolate bar, the kind that used to make Lily squeal with excitement, but this time she just said quietly, "I don't like sweets," and ran straight to her room, slamming the door shut. The sound of the door echoed like a knife in my heart. Julian shrugged and laughed dismissively. "I guess she's hitting her teenage years early." "What an attitude." He said it jokingly, but his eyes were as cold as ice, as if he were studying me. I didn't answer, just went silently to the kitchen, but inside, a storm was about to break. I started paying attention to every little detail. The following days, I tried to watch Lily more closely. That night, when I went into her room to pick up the dirty laundry, I found her sitting in a corner, hugging her knees, in complete darkness, without the light on. She was hugging her old teddy bear tightly, the one she had always carried with her since they took her dad, Michael, away. I approached her and asked quietly, "What's wrong, sweetheart? Why don't you turn on the light?" Lily looked up, her eyes red, but she quickly shook her head. "It's nothing, Grandma." I managed to see how she pulled down the sleeve of her pajamas, covering her wrist. A bad feeling washed over me, but I didn't dare to look closer, afraid I couldn't handle what I thought I would find. I sat next to her, placed my hand on her head, and stroked her soft hair. "You know how much your grandma loves you, right? If something scares you, tell me. I'll protect you." Lily nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the floor, as if she were keeping a secret too big to tell. I left the room, but my soul felt as heavy as if I were carrying stones. I knew she was scared, and I knew who was scaring her. The following nights, I started paying more attention. Lily wasn't sleeping well. She would wake up startled in the middle of the night. Once, I heard whimpering from her room. "No, no, please." Her voice trembled, as if she were begging in the middle of a nightmare. I ran in, turned on the light, and found her curled up in a ball on the bed, drenched in sweat. I hugged her tightly and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Grandma's here." But Lily just hugged me back without saying a word, her little body trembling in my arms. Every time Julian got close, I clearly saw the panic in Lily's eyes. When he brought her a glass of juice, she would just hold it without drinking, her hands trembling. When he patted her on the shoulder, she would flinch, as if the mere contact hurt her. But in front of everyone, Julian was always the perfect man. He laughed, chatted, helped me carry the grocery bags, fixed the broken pipe, and even bought Lily new notebooks. Jessica looked at him with admiration, as if he were the hero of her life. But I could see behind that mask. I saw how he looked at Lily when he thought no one was watching, a look that now chilled me to the bone. In the afternoon, I sat by the window. The faint, golden sunlight filtered through the glass, reflecting on Lily's worn-out sweater that I was carefully mending. My heart felt heavy, as if the happy days of my family had been buried under the dust of time. Every stitch the needle made in the fabric was like a cut in my heart, pulling me back to the days when Lily's laughter was the most beautiful music in this house. I remember the years when Jessica, my daughter, was young, when she shone like the Sunday. Jessica had a happy marriage with Michael, her ex-husband, whom I always loved like a son. Michael was a civil engineer, a good man of few words, but with a heart as big as the sky. Every afternoon when he came home from work, he would lift Lily into his arms, sit her on his shoulders, and the two of them would laugh out loud on their way to the park on the corner. "Grandma, I want strawberry ice cream," Lily would shout in her crystal-clear voice, and Michael would wink at me, pretending to complain. This girl, strawberry ice cream every day. I think I'm going to have to plant a field of strawberries just for you. I would watch them from the porch, the two of them holding hands, and my heart would feel warm, as if the fire of our home was wrapped around me. Dinners were the time I cherished the most. Michael was always attentive. He would pour me a glass of water and ask in his deep, warm voice, "How are you, ma'am? Weren't you too tired today?" Jessica would chatter about her work, from the new coworker who talked bad about the boss to the projects that excited her. Lily, who would have been 3 or 4 at the time, would sit in her high chair, swinging her little feet, and burst into laughter every time Michael made her laugh. Her laughter was like a wind chime, echoing through the house, making all my fatigue disappear. I used to tell myself, as long as my family is always like this, I don't need anything else. But one fateful day, everything shattered like a broken dream. I remember that afternoon perfectly, when the front door burst open. 3 police officers entered with cold faces and read an arrest warrant for Michael for a kickback scheme on a big construction project. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. Jessica screamed, her voice torn, "No, you're mistaken. My husband didn't do anything wrong." Lily, who was just 5 years old, clung to my skirt, and with her confused little eyes, she asked me, "Grandma, where is my daddy going? Why are they taking him?" I hugged her tightly, trying to make my voice sound calm, but inside, I felt a fire burning me. "Your daddy is just going on a work trip, my love. He'll be back soon." I lied to her, just so she wouldn't be scared, but I didn't even know myself if Michael would ever come back. Since then, laughter disappeared from the house. Jessica changed completely. She became irritable, bitter, as if all the misery in the world was Lily's fault. I remember one night when Lily spilled a glass of orange juice, and Jessica yelled at her, "It's always you. If it weren't for you, my life wouldn't be this mess. You are the burden that's dragging me down." Lily stood still, her eyes full of tears, and it broke my soul. I pulled her to me, trying to comfort her, but Jessica's words were like knives stabbing my heart. I wanted to say something, to defend Lily, but every time I opened my mouth, Jessica would shut me down. "Stay out of it, Mom. You don't understand anything." I felt helpless. I could only hug my granddaughter and whisper, "I'm here, don't be afraid." Time passed, and Jessica withdrew more into herself, focused only on her work and a pain she never shared with me. I tried to be the pillar for both of them, but every day I felt more like a shadow in my own home. Until one day, Jessica came back with a radiant smile I hadn't seen in a long time. She was holding a man's hand, and she introduced him to me with a voice full of pride. "Mom, this is Julian. He's a good man, and he's going to help me rebuild my life." I looked at Julian, a tall man with a kind smile and a shrewd look in his eyes. He called me Mrs. Eleanor in a respectful voice and brought a gift basket of fruit. I smiled back, thinking that maybe this was a ray of hope for my family. Soon after, Jessica let Julian move into the house, although there was no wedding. I didn't object. I just hoped Jessica would find happiness after so many years of suffering. Julian seemed like the perfect man. He helped me with the grocery bags, fixed the broken pipe in the kitchen, and even painted the living room wall that was already peeling. With Lily, he played the role of a dedicated uncle. He bought her new school supplies. Sometimes he would take her to and from school, and he always defended her when Jessica scolded her. "Come on, my love. She's just a child. Don't be so hard on her," he would say in a soft voice, making Jessica smile and hug him. I came to think that I was lucky to have someone like Julian at home, someone to bring us the stability we had lost. But sometimes I witnessed moments that left a thorn in my heart. Once, while Lily was doing her homework at the dining room table, Julian stood behind her, watching her for longer than necessary. That look wasn't that of a concerned uncle. It was something else I couldn't describe, like a dark shadow lurking. I told myself, I must be getting old, seeing things that aren't there. I tried to ignore it, but that feeling of unease grew, especially after what I saw on the camera last night. Those images were like a stab to the heart, making me realize I wasn't imagining anything. Julian, the man the whole neighborhood praised, was hiding a demon under his perfect mask. That night, the kitchen smelled of the burgers Jessica was cooking on the stove. The sound of the knife chopping vegetables, mixed with the sizzle of the meat, seemed like an attempt to drown out the tension that was squeezing my heart. I stood by the kitchen door, clutching an old dish towel in my hand, mustering all the courage I had to say what I knew would shake my family to its core. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I couldn't let Lily, my little granddaughter, continue to live in fear. I took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and with a trembling but firm voice, I said, "Jessica, I need to talk to you. I've seen Julian doing things with Lily that aren't right." As soon as the words came out, it felt as if the whole room had fallen silent. The knife stopped. Jessica spun around, her eyes blazing like two flames, shooting me a furious look I had never seen before. "Are you starting with this again, Mom?" she snapped, her voice as sharp as a razor. "You're always imagining things. The kid is probably making up stories to get attention. She doesn't like that I have someone new. Don't you see that?" I felt a bitter taste in my throat, as if I had swallowed a poison pill. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her I wasn't imagining anything, that I had seen Julian's actions on the camera with my own eyes. My trembling hand went into my apron pocket, about to pull out my cell phone to show her the horrible video. But just then, the door opened. Julian walked in, carrying a grocery bag, his face radiant with that same old smile that now sent shivers down my spine. He put the bag on the table, looked at Jessica and me, and asked with false concern, "What's wrong, my loves? Why the long faces?" Jessica didn't even let me open my mouth. She turned to Julian, her voice filled with anger, as if I had offended her. "My mom is saying things about you again. She says you're not behaving properly with Lily. How ridiculous." I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the floor open up beneath my feet. Jessica's words were like a stab, not just to my heart, but they made me realize that she had completely sided with Julian, against her own mother. Julian looked at me, his eyes wide, putting on a perfect act. "Eleanor, do you really think I'd be capable of something like that?" he said, his voice trembling, as if he were deeply hurt. "I've always seen Lily as my own daughter. Don't you see how I've tried to take care of this family?" He paused, pretending his voice was breaking, and ran a hand over his eyes as if holding back tears. "I don't understand why you distrust me like this, Mrs. Eleanor." The way he called me Mrs. Eleanor, with that respectful voice, now only made me sick. Jessica immediately went to him, wrapped her arms around him, and comforted him. "Don't pay any attention to her, my love. My mom's getting old. She imagines things. I believe you. I know you would never do something like that." Her smile was tender. Her gaze towards Julian was full of love, as if he were her entire world. I was speechless. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was defending a monster and pushing me aside. I wanted to scream, to shake Jessica and tell her she was blind, that she was putting her own daughter in danger. But I couldn't. The words got stuck in my throat, and I just stood there, helpless, watching as Julian, over Jessica's shoulder, gave me an almost imperceptible smile. It was the smile of a winner, a smile that chilled me to the bone. I turned around in silence and walked to my room, my feet heavy as if I were dragging chains. Helplessness washed over me like a giant wave, pulling me to the bottom of the sea. I closed my bedroom door, collapsed onto the bed, and covered my face with my hands. I raised Jessica. I loved her. I sacrificed my whole life so she could have something better. And now, she saw me as an enemy, a paranoid old woman trying to ruin her happiness. I asked myself, what made Jessica change so much? Did the pain from what happened with Michael harden her heart? Or did Julian manipulate her so skillfully that he turned her into a stranger to her own mother? That night, dinner was a silent hell. Jessica ignored me on purpose. She only chatted animatedly with Julian. "What do you think of this dish, my love?" "A coworker at work taught me how to make it," she said, smiling, with a joy that seemed to care about nothing else. Julian nodded, praising her. "It's delicious, my love. You're an incredible cook." He turned to me with a fake smile. "What did you think, Mrs. Eleanor?" I just nodded without answering, because I knew that if I opened my mouth, I wouldn't be able to hold back the words welling up in my throat. Lily sat next to me, stiff as a statue, eating with her head down, not daring to look at anyone. Her little hands clung to her utensils, as if trying to hold something back. After dinner, I saw Julian pull a bouquet of red roses from his bag and give it to Jessica with a syrupy voice. "For you, because you always make me happy." Jessica beamed, hugging him, her eyes shining with joy. "Thank you, my love. They're beautiful," she exclaimed, and then turned to me with a hint of reproach in her voice. "See, Mom? Julian is always so thoughtful." I didn't respond, just got up in silence to clear the plates, my heart in pieces. Meanwhile, Lily got up without a sound, slipped into her room, and closed the door without a word. I went after her, intending to comfort her, but when I reached the door, I heard a soft sob from inside. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't dare to go in. Lily's crying was like a knife in my heart. Every sob was a reminder that I was failing to protect her. I stood in the dark hallway for a long time, feeling more alone than ever. The next morning, I was in the yard, sweeping the dry leaves that covered the path. The morning sunlight was on my face, but it couldn't take away the chill that gripped my heart. I was still tormented by last night's conversation with Jessica, Julian's triumphant look, and Lily's muffled sobs from behind her bedroom door. I swept the leaves, trying to focus on each movement of the broom, but my mind kept replaying the image of my granddaughter trembling, huddled in the dark corner of her room. Suddenly, the ringing of the phone pulled me from my thoughts. I jumped and took the old cell phone out of my apron pocket. It was Miss Davis, Lily's teacher. Her voice on the other end of the line sounded urgent, not like the other times she called to ask a routine question. "Mrs. Eleanor, could you please come to the school right away? It's something important about Lily." My heart started to pound, as if someone were squeezing it. I didn't ask any more questions, just quickly replied, "I'm on my way," and hung up. With trembling hands, I locked the door, grabbed my old sweater hanging in the corner, and hurried out onto the street. The whole way to the school, I couldn't stop thinking about Lily. What could have happened? Had she gotten into trouble in class? Oh, a horrible thought crossed my mind, making me tremble. Could it have something to do with Julian? When I arrived at the school gate, Miss Davis was already waiting for me. Her face showed concern, and her eyes revealed clear tension. She didn't say much, just gestured for me to follow her to an empty teacher's lounge. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, as if it were hiding a terrible secret. Lily was sitting there, on a small wooden chair, hugging her backpack against her chest, as if it were her only shield. Next to her was Chloe, her best friend, whose little hand held Lily's tightly, not letting go. When she saw me, Lily looked up, but her gaze was empty, and she pressed her lips together, trying not to look directly at me. I felt the fear emanating from her small body, and my heart felt as if it were breaking in two. Miss Davis slid a drawing notebook towards me and said in a serious voice, "Mrs. Eleanor, I think you should see this." I took the notebook, and with trembling hands, I opened it. On the page was a drawing that took my breath away. It was a tall, deformed figure, like a monster with glowing red eyes, whose long arms reached out to a tiny girl huddled in a dark corner. The strokes were rough, filled with somber colors, as if they had been drawn in a fit of desperation. I turned to the next pages, and my heart sank deeper and deeper. They were all similar images: the red-eyed monster, the little girl with a panicked face, and darkness covering the entire page. I looked up at Miss Davis, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "What? What is this, Miss Davis?" The teacher lowered her voice, as if afraid of hurting someone else. I asked Lily who it was. She told me, "It's my mom's boyfriend." Those words were like a direct stab to my heart. My head was spinning. Everything around me became blurry. Julian, he was the monster in Lily's drawings. I turned to look at my granddaughter, but she just lowered her head, her lips pressed together, as if she were holding in a secret too big to tell. Chloe, Lily's little friend, spoke timidly, with a tiny but worried voice. "Ma'am, Lily once told me she was very scared to go home. She said that every time that man looked at her, she felt really awful. And she also told me that sometimes he called her into his room when her mom wasn't there." Chloe's words were like a thunderclap in my head. I felt my blood run cold, and my breath caught in my chest. I pulled a chair closer to Lily, knelt in front of her, hugged her tightly, and said with a trembling voice, "My love, whatever it is, tell your grandma, I'm here, I will protect you." Lily shook her head, her eyes full of tears. But then she leaned close to my ear and whispered a sentence that shattered my soul. "Grandma, take me anywhere, but don't make me go back to that house. I'm so scared." Her voice was tiny, shaky, like a final plea. I hugged her tighter, feeling her little body tremble in my arms. Her muffled sobs were like knives in my heart. I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, but I knew I had to be strong. For Lily, I couldn't afford to be weak. "Miss." Davis looked at me with a gaze full of compassion, but also urgency. "Mrs. Eleanor, I've been watching Lily these past few weeks. She's not the same. She barely talks. She doesn't smile, and these drawings show that she's terrified. As a teacher, I can only inform the family, but you have to do something immediately." I nodded, without saying more. I knew she was right. I had waited too long. I had hoped it was all a misunderstanding. But now, Lily's drawings and her plea were the clearest proof. I lifted Lily into my arms. I held her tight and left the room. She hid her face in my shoulder, her small body shaken by muffled sobs. "Grandma, I don't want to go home," Lily whispered, her voice so faint it almost vanished. I held her tighter and whispered back, "I'm not going to let you be scared ever again, my love. I promise." Suddenly, I remembered Dr. Miller, a psychologist who had been a good friend of my husband when he was alive. Dr. Miller was a good man, always willing to listen and understand, and I knew he was the only one who could help me better understand what was happening to Lily. I picked up the phone, and with trembling hands, I dialed his number. When his voice came on the line, I almost choked. "Dr. Miller, I need to see you. It's about Lily, my granddaughter. It's something very serious." He agreed to see me that same day, asking me to come to his private office, downtown. "Bring her here, Eleanor," he said, his voice deep but full of concern. "I'll do everything I can." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and hung up, feeling as if I had found a ray of hope in the middle of the storm that was drowning me. I looked at Lily, still curled up in my arms, her little hand clinging to my blouse, as if she feared that if she let go, the wind would carry her away. "Grandma, I'm so tired," she whispered faintly. I stroked her hair, trying to make my voice sound as sweet as possible. "Rest a little, my love. I'm going to take you to a safe place." In the afternoon, I took Lily by the hand to Dr. Miller's office. The place was bright and warm, with fun children's drawings hanging on the walls, flying elephants, smiling fish, and colorful houses. But that cheerful atmosphere couldn't dispel the fear in my heart. Lily squeezed my hand tightly, her steps slow, as if each one was a great effort. I gently squeezed her hand back and whispered, "Don't worry, my love. Dr. Miller is Grandma's friend. He's very nice." Dr. Miller came out, his hair graying, but with the same kind smile as always. He shook my hand firmly, with a look full of compassion, and then sat down in front of Lily, getting down to her level. "Hello, Lily," he said, with a warm voice like a grandfather's. "Don't you worry. No one here is going to make you say anything. Would you like to draw a picture? Draw whatever you want." Lily remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor, her hand still hugging the teddy bear I brought for her, a gift from Michael, the only thing she always kept by her side. Dr. Miller placed a box of crayons and a blank sheet of paper in front of her, and then leaned back, watching in silence. At first, Lily didn't touch the crayons. She just sat there, with a lost look, as if she were in a world I couldn't reach. I sat beside her, my heart in pieces, wanting to hug her, but not daring to interrupt. Then, as if driven by an emotion she couldn't contain, Lily's trembling little hand picked up the black crayon. The first strokes appeared, slow, hesitant. Little by little, a giant silhouette formed on the paper, a tall, deformed figure, with two sharp horns on its head and arms extended like a cage imprisoning a tiny girl. The girl in the drawing was huddled, with big, round eyes full of panic, her arms wrapped around herself as if she wanted to disappear. I looked at the drawing, with a sharp pain in my chest. The image was too similar to the ones I had seen in her school notebook, but this time Lily's fear seemed to be drawn with more clarity, more force, like a silent scream. Dr. Miller just nodded silently, his gaze fixed on each stroke. in no hurry at all. When Lily put the crayon down, she turned to hug her teddy bear, hiding her face in it, as if wanting to escape from the world. Dr. Miller asked gently, "Who is that, Lily? Do you want to tell me?" But the little girl just shook her head. Her tear-filled eyes looked at me, a pleading look, as if she were asking me to save her from this nightmare. After the session, Dr. Miller took me into the hallway, closing the door so Lily couldn't hear. His face turned serious, and his voice became grave. "Mrs. Eleanor, the child shows signs of very severe psychological trauma. These drawings, along with her withdrawn behavior, indicate that the fear has taken deep root in her mind. The risk of depression is very high, and if we don't intervene in time, the consequences could be much worse." I nodded, clutching my purse strap, feeling like the whole world was crashing down on me. He continued, with urgency in his voice, "My advice is this. Under no circumstances should you leave Lily alone with that man. You need to get her out of that environment immediately. Do you have any proof to confirm this?" Trembling, I told him what I saw on the camera, Julian's gestures, Lily's panicked look, and the drawings from school. Dr. Miller listened, nodding, and then placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing, Eleanor, but you need to act fast. I will write an official report on Lily's condition, but you must take her to a safe place and report this to the authorities." I nodded, with a lump in my throat. I knew he was right, but the thought of confronting Julian, of convincing Jessica, and possibly taking the matter to court terrified me. But for Lily, there was no turning back. As we left the office, Lily didn't let go of my hand. Her little hand was ice cold. She whispered in a faint voice, "Grandma, don't make me go back to that house, please." Those words were like a dagger in my heart. I stopped, knelt in front of her, and hugged her with all my strength. "I promise, my love," I said with a broken voice, "I won't let anyone hurt you ever again. I'm going to take you to a safe place." Lily hid her face in my shoulder. Her soft sobs made me want to cry with her, but I held back, dried my tears, stood up, and taking her by the hand, we left. My heart was heavy, but full of determination. I promised myself, from this moment on, I would be the last wall to protect Lily, even if I had to face the whole world, including my own daughter. I knew the road ahead would be full of thorns, but for my granddaughter, I was willing to do anything. After the visit to Dr. Miller, I felt as if the world were collapsing at my feet. His words about Lily's psychological state, about the fear so deeply rooted in her soul, were like an alarm bell that wouldn't stop ringing in my head. I, Eleanor, a 68-year-old grandmother, knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act. I had to seek help to protect my little granddaughter. But the house, which was once my home, now felt like a prison full of shadows. I decided to seek out my neighbors, the familiar faces I chatted with every day, hoping they would understand and support me. I left the house with a heavy heart, but clinging to a little bit of hope. The first person I looked for was Mrs. Gable, my neighbor across the street, whom I had always considered a friend. She was sitting on her porch, knitting in the shade of an olive tree. I took a deep breath, approached her, and said cautiously, "Mrs. Gable, I need to talk to you. Have you ever noticed anything strange between Julian and my granddaughter Lily?" I hoped she would feel the seriousness in my voice, that she would listen to me. But Mrs. Gable looked up, hesitated for a moment, and then let out a nervous chuckle that chilled my heart. "Julian? For heaven's sake, Eleanor, the man's a saint. Just last week he even got up on the roof to fix a light for me. How can you make things up about such a good person?" Mrs. Gable's words were like a blow to the chest. I tried to stay calm and explained, "Mrs. Gable, I'm not making anything up. I've seen things that worry me, and even Lily's teacher has noticed that the girl is scared." But she just shook her head, with a look of pity. "Eleanor, don't overthink it. Julian is a decent man. The whole neighborhood knows it. Maybe you're just worrying too much in your old age." I stood there frozen, feeling the floor sink beneath my feet. Mrs. Gable, with whom I had shared so many stories, now looked at me as if I were a crazy old woman just looking for trouble. I didn't give up. I kept walking and knocked on the door of Mr. Chen, the owner of the corner store, who always greeted me with a friendly smile in the mornings. I told him the story, trying to make my voice sound calm. Mr. Chen, have you seen Julian do anything strange with Lily? The girl is very scared. Mr. Chen stopped counting money. He looked at me suspiciously and then stated, "Young Julian? He comes by every day to buy things for Jessica, and even buys candy for the neighborhood kids. Such a family man. What could you possibly criticize, Mrs. Eleanor?" I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell him about the video, about Lily's drawings, but Mr. Chen's look told me not to bother him anymore. I turned around in silence, my soul hanging by a thread. I continued down the street, knocking on door after door, from Mrs. Clara's house to young Miguel's. But every door that opened only brought more disappointment. Everyone had a good story about Julian. One said he helped them move, another that he fixed a pipe for them without charging. Mrs. Teresa, the oldest in the neighborhood, even told me to my face, "Julian treats me like I'm his mother, Eleanor. You have such a good son-in-law and you don't appreciate him. Stop ruining your daughter's happiness." Her words were like a knife, cutting deep into my heart. I was stunned, unable to believe that the whole neighborhood, the people I considered my friends, had turned their backs on me for someone like Julian. He had silently built a perfect facade, making everyone believe he was an exemplary man, and that I was just a paranoid old woman. I returned home, dragging my feet as if I were wearing shackles. Lily was still at Mrs. Gable's house, where I had left her to be safe. I didn't want her to face Julian. I didn't want her to suffer a second more of fear. Sitting in the cold kitchen, I gathered the courage to try to convince Jessica one last time. When Jessica came out of her room, a cup of coffee in her hand, I called her. "Jessica, we need to talk." She looked at me with cold eyes, but she sat down. I took a deep breath and said with a trembling voice, "Honey, I have proof. I saw Julian doing something inappropriate with Lily on the camera, and the psychologist says the girl has trauma. Please, think about Lily." Jessica slammed the cup on the table, her voice as sharp as a knife. "That's enough, Mom. You're the one destroying this family. Julian was the one who picked me up after so many years of living in hell, and that child—" She paused, her eyes blazing with anger. "That child is just a burden. Don't believe her lies." I froze, seeing Lily peek out from behind me, her trembling little hands clutching my apron. Jessica's words were like daggers in my heart, hurting me so much that I could barely breathe. My daughter, the one I raised, was now calling her own child a burden and defending a man I knew was a demon. I stood up, squeezing Lily's hand, and looked Jessica straight in the eyes. My voice trembled, but it was filled with determination. "If you no longer believe me, or your own daughter, then from this day on, Lily and I are no longer your family." Jessica let out a bitter laugh, her gaze icy. "Perfect. I don't need anyone. Julian is all I need." She turned to hug Julian, who had just entered the room. His gaze passed over me with a concealed smile, as if he knew he had won. I pulled Lily out of the room, closing the door behind me. The sound of the door closing was like a final declaration, separating me and my granddaughter from the house that was once our home. Inside me, a flame of determination ignited. I knew I was losing Jessica, that I was losing the neighborhood that had been my community, but I didn't care. For Lily, I was willing to change everything. The next morning, I woke up with a burning determination in my heart. After months of living with fear and helplessness, I knew I couldn't let Lily suffer for another second. My granddaughter's pleas, her disturbing drawings, and Dr. Miller's diagnosis were like a fire pushing me to act. I couldn't let Julian continue to hide the demon inside him under that mask of perfection. Today, I would bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. I sat at the kitchen table. The morning light streamed through the window, but it couldn't warm the cold I felt in my soul. In front of me was my old cell phone with the camera video, the irrefutable proof of Julian's horrible acts. Carefully, I saved a copy of the video, noted the exact date, and took out Lily's drawings that Miss Baxensalve, Juan IDS, Davis had given me. Those strokes of black, red, and dark blue crayon that formed the image of the bright-eyed monster and the girl huddled in a corner broke my heart every time I saw them. I also printed the photos of the faint bruises on Lily's wrist, those marks I discovered by accident when she quickly pulled down her sleeve. I organized each piece of evidence carefully in a folder, my hands trembling but my heart firm. I called Lily, who was staying with Mrs. Gable, and told her, "My love, you're coming with me today. We're going to do something very important." She looked up, still with a bit of fear in her eyes, but she nodded, clinging to her teddy bear. I took her to the police station, walking with heavy but unwavering steps. Inside me, a voice kept repeating, "Eleanor, for Lily, you have to do this." When we entered, a young police officer named Evans assisted us. He had a serious face but a kind look. I placed the folder on the desk and said with a choked voice, "Officer, I'm here to report something very serious. It's about my granddaughter, Lily." Officer Evans listened intently as I told him everything, from the camera video and Lily's drawings to Dr. Miller's diagnosis of her psychological state. I tried to keep my voice steady, but every time I mentioned Julian, I couldn't stop the tears from rolling down my cheeks. I tried to tell my daughter, but she didn't believe me, I said, with a lump in my throat. I can't let my granddaughter continue to live with this fear. Officer Evans nodded, reviewed each page of the folder, and then played the video on his computer. When the image of Julian pulling Lily towards him appeared, his expression hardened. He said in a grave voice, "Don't worry, Mrs. Eleanor. This evidence is very clear. We will start the investigation immediately." That afternoon, I stood across the street, hugging Lily, as I watched a patrol car park in front of the house. My heart pounded, a mix of nerves and relief. Julian was sitting on the porch, a beer in his hand, as calm as ever. But when he saw the police officers get out, his face changed color, and the beer can fell from his hand, shattering on the ground. Jessica ran out of the house, desperate, and stood in front of the door with her arms outstretched. "You're mistaken. My boyfriend did nothing. You can't come in." Her voice sounded broken, full of anguish, but I remained still, hugging Lily so she wouldn't have to see the mess. A police officer read the arrest warrant in a firm voice. "Julian Morales, you are under arrest as a suspect in the corruption of a minor." Julian stammered that he was innocent, his voice trembling. "I didn't do anything. It's all an invention of that old woman. You have no proof." But when the handcuffs closed on his wrists, he could only lower his head, his eyes filled with panic. Jessica was crying, clinging to an officer's arm. "Please, don't take him. He's innocent. My mom made it all up." I heard those words and felt my heart break. My daughter, the one I raised, was now shouting to defend the man who had hurt her own child. The officer looked at Jessica and said coldly, "You'll also need to come with us to the station for the investigation, on suspicion of being an accessory." Jessica froze, shaking her head again and again, but in the end, they took her in the patrol car too. Lily snuggled against me and whispered, "Grandma, is my mom going to be okay?" I hugged her tighter, trying to make my voice sound calm. "Your mom will be okay, my love. But right now, my duty is to protect you first." Inside me, pain mixed with relief. I had done what I had to do, even if it meant losing Jessica. The neighbors began to gather around the house, whispering. Some covered their mouths in surprise, others whispered in shame. Mrs. Teresa, the one who had criticized me, stood on the corner stammering, "It can't be, young Julian." Some started to look at me with guilty eyes. Mr. Chen, from the corner store, approached and said with a trembling voice, "Mrs. Eleanor, we were wrong. I never imagined." I just nodded, without responding. I didn't blame them, but the pain in my heart was too great to forgive so soon. The news spread like wildfire. A few days later, the local newspapers published the story. "Man with good neighbor facade arrested for corruption of a minor." Those words, though they confirmed the truth, hurt me. I didn't want the whole world to know about my family's pain, but I knew it was the price to pay to protect Lily. I sat on the couch, hugging her, as she snuggled against me. Lily's gaze still held fear, but I saw a small glimmer, a relief I hadn't seen in a long time. "Grandma, he's not coming back, right?" she asked in her little voice. I stroked her hair and whispered, "That's right, my love. He won't hurt you anymore." I knew this battle was just beginning. Ahead were long days of trials, questions from the police, and perhaps a permanent estrangement from Jessica. But seeing Lily's eyes, I felt that every sacrifice was worth it. I had brought the monster into the light, and although my heart was shattered, I knew I had done the right thing. I hugged her tighter, promising myself that I would spend the rest of my life protecting her, giving her the safe and happy life she deserved. On the morning of the trial, I woke up with a mix of relief and heaviness. Julian's case had been fast-tracked due to the seriousness of the matter and public interest. I stood in front of the mirror. I adjusted my worn-out blue sweater, trying to look strong, but inside I was a chaos of pain, anger, and a little bit of hope that justice would be served. I looked at myself in the mirror. The deep wrinkles seemed to tell the story of these months of suffering. Today, I would take Lily to the courthouse, to face the truth, to protect her, and to close this painful chapter of our lives. I went to Mrs. Gable's house to pick up Lily. She was sitting in a corner of the living room, hugging her teddy bear, her gaze lost. I knelt, stroked her hair, and said in a soft voice, "My love, we're going to the courthouse today. You don't have to say anything. Just being by my side is enough." Lily nodded, her little hand clinging to mine, as if I were her only anchor in this storm. We walked out onto the street. The morning sun illuminated Lily's pale face, but it couldn't dispel the fear still visible in her eyes. When we arrived at the courthouse, the scene at the entrance left me frozen. Reporters and people from the neighborhood surrounded the entrance, holding signs that said, "Justice for Lily," and "The demon must pay." The cries of indignation echoed through the street, like a chorus of fury. I held Lily's hand tighter, pulling her close, trying to shield her from the chaos. "Grandma, there are so many people," she whispered, her voice trembling. I bent down and smiled to reassure her. "Don't be afraid, my love. They're here to support us." But inside, I was trembling too. Not because of the crowd, but for the moment I would have to face Julian and Jessica in the courtroom. Inside the courtroom, the air was as heavy as lead. Julian was brought in, dressed in a gray prison uniform, his head bowed, not daring to look at anyone. He was no longer the confident man with a fake smile I knew. Now he looked small, weak, like someone whose mask has been torn away. Jessica entered behind him, her face gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes red from crying so much. I looked at my daughter and felt my heart break. Jessica, the daughter I raised, was now there, accused of being an accomplice to the man who hurt her own child. I wanted to run and hug her, to tell her I still loved her, but the pain she had caused Lily kept me from moving. I squeezed Lily's hand, feeling it tremble in mine, but her eyes, though scared, looked straight ahead with determination, as if she were ready to face her nightmare. The judge, a woman with a stern face, banged her gavel to begin the session. The prosecutor began to present the case, his voice clear and firm. "We have conclusive evidence of the crime of corruption of a minor by the defendant, Julian Morales, as well as the complicity of Miss Jessica Lopez in covering up the crime." The whole room held its breath when the camera video was projected onto a large screen. The image of Julian holding Lily, the look of panic on the girl's face, and his violent gesture appeared with brutal clarity. Murmurs of anger began to be heard, like a wave of indignation sweeping through the room. Dr. Miller's report was read aloud, the prosecutor's voice echoing. "The minor, Lily Lopez, shows signs of severe psychological trauma resulting from the intimidation and mental terrorism suffered over a prolonged period." I felt Lily's hand squeeze mine tighter, as if each word reopened her wounds. I leaned in and whispered, "I'm here, my love. Everything's going to be okay." But I myself was trembling, not knowing if I had the strength to guide her through this. Julian's lawyer stood up, trying to argue. "This video could have been edited. There is no direct proof that my client committed an illicit act." But the prosecutor immediately refuted him, presenting a report from an expert confirming the video's integrity. "This is irrefutable proof," he said in a cold voice. The defendant took advantage of the family's trust to commit his depraved acts, and Miss Jessica Lopez, knowing this, chose to cover it up instead of protecting her daughter. It was Jessica's turn to be questioned. She stood up, her hands trembling, but still stubbornly defending him. "My boyfriend is innocent. My daughter is lying. She just wants attention." Jessica's voice broke, as if even she didn't believe what she was saying. The prosecutor looked her straight in the eye and said sternly, "Miss Lopez, you knew about Julian Morales' behavior, but you ignored it and even covered up his crime. You failed in your role as a mother." Those words were like a sledgehammer blow that made Jessica collapse into her chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. But no one in the room felt sorry for her anymore. I looked at my daughter, my heart shattered. I wanted to believe that Jessica was just blinded, that she hadn't meant to hurt Lily on purpose, but what she did had crossed all lines of forgiveness. Finally, the judge banged the gavel. Her voice resonated with clarity. Having considered all the evidence, the court finds Julian Morales guilty of the crime of corruption of a minor and sentences him to 12 years in prison. To Jessica Lopez, for the crime of complicity and cover-up, she is sentenced to 3 years in prison, and her parental rights are permanently terminated. The sound of the gavel was like a final cut, closing the nightmare Lily had lived through. Julian was taken away with his head down while Jessica screamed, "No, please, I didn't mean to." But her cries were drowned out by the shouts of the crowd outside. When the police led them out of the courthouse, the people waiting outside unleashed their fury with rotten eggs and curses. "Demon! Traitor!" The shout sounded like a second sentence. I hugged Lily tightly, shielding her from the chaotic scene, and whispered in her ear, "It's over, my love. It's all over. Justice has been served." Lily buried her face in my chest. She said nothing, but I felt her little body gradually relax, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. After the trial, I decided to quit my cleaning job, which I had done for decades. The days in front of a sink or cleaning other people's floors no longer made sense compared to dedicating all my time to caring for Lily, my little granddaughter. I wanted to use the years I had left to give her a safe life, a real home. The old house, which was full of painful memories, now needed to be filled with love and peaceful moments. In the first few days after the trial, Lily was still tormented by nightmares. I would often wake up in the middle of the night to her muffled screams, sounds that broke my soul. I would run to her room, hug her, and whisper, "It's okay, my love. Grandma's here." Lily would snuggle into my chest, her little body trembling, but gradually those screams became less frequent. Instead, I started to hear the calm, regular breathing of my granddaughter as she slept. Every night, I would sit by her bed, watching her sleep, my heart aching for what had happened, but relieved to know the nightmare was over. One morning, I decided to do something to bring joy back to Lily. I went to the store and bought her a new box of crayons, the kind with all the bright colors she used to love. When I gave her the box, Lily's eyes lit up, even if just for a moment. "Grandma, they're so beautiful," she exclaimed in her clear little voice. I smiled, sat beside her, and watched her carefully open the box and start to draw. Her first strokes were still timid, but then, on the blank page, images began to appear. A bright yellow sun, flowers of many colors, and dolls that were always smiling. There were no more red-eyed monsters or dark shadows. I looked at the drawing, and tears started to fall without me realizing it. Lily was slowly recovering, and I knew that although the road would be long, she was going to be okay. The neighbors, the ones who had turned their backs on me, started to come around. One afternoon, Mrs. Gable knocked on the door. She brought a basket of freshly baked cookies that smelled deliciously of butter. She stood there, her eyes full of guilt, and said with a trembling voice, "Mrs. Eleanor, how blind we were. I never imagined that Julian was that kind of person. Please, forgive me for what I said to you." I looked at her, still with a little pain, but I nodded and gave her a weak smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable. I just wanted Lily to be safe, Mrs." Gable took my hand, her eyes red. "You are the strongest woman I know, Eleanor. If you need anything at all, just tell me." Those words, though late, warmed my heart a little. The day Lily went back to school, I held her hand as we walked the usual path. She was nervous. I was afraid she would withdraw into herself again, that she would be afraid to be separated from me. But as soon as we reached the school gate, her friend Chloe and a group of children ran towards her, surrounding her with smiles. "Lily, are you okay now? We missed you so much," Chloe shouted, pulling her by the hand. A boy in the group, with curly hair, raised his fist in the air and shouted, "From now on, we'll be Lily's bodyguards. No monster is getting near her." All the children laughed and took Lily to the playground, as if nothing had happened. I watched them from a distance, and without realizing it, I started to laugh. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of happiness. Lily looked at me and gave me a radiant, crystal-clear smile, one I hadn't seen in a long time. The following days, I watched as Lily regained her innocence. One day, after school, I saw her surrounded by her friends, walking and singing a children's song. Lily was in the middle, her cheeks rosy and a smile on her face. A boy from the group, with a branch he used as a sword, shouted, "We're going to protect Lily forever." Lily let out a laugh, turned to look at me, and her eyes shone with joy. I stood there, my heart warm. The wounds in her soul might not have fully healed, but that smile was proof that she was coming out of the darkness. One afternoon, I took Lily for a walk along our usual path. The evening sun painted everything gold, covering our shadows with a warm light. I gently squeezed her hand and said quietly, "Let's go home, my love." Lily looked up, nodded, and her clear eyes shone with the sunlight. "Yes, Grandma," she replied, her voice soft but full of life. We walked. Our shadows, one large and one small, stretched out on the path, peaceful, steady. I knew the painful chapter had closed to make way for a new dawn, one full of love and hope. After everything we went through, I realized one thing. Silence can kill trust and happiness, but the courage to speak the truth, even if it means facing loss, is what truly saves the ones we love. The lesson I want to share with everyone is, never ignore the signs, especially when it comes to children. Listen with your heart, trust your instincts, and act in time, because there are wounds that, if not protected and healed from the beginning, can haunt a lifetime. I lost a lot, but I know I did the right thing, for the safety and future of my granddaughter. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We are not telling this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose silence to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your own voice? I would like to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. May God bless you always, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I will leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for being with me until this moment.